and welcome to Outlook. Tonight, Professor David McClellan of the English Department of East Tennessee State University has as a special guest the brother of the novelist Thomas Wolfe, Mr. Fred Wolfe of Spartanburg, South Carolina. Mr. Fred Wolfe is the sole surviving member of the Wolfe family of Asheville, North Carolina. Professor McClellan and Mr. Wolfe will be reminiscing about Wolfe's famous brother, Thomas. And now, here is Professor McClellan.
Mr. Wolfe, your fabulous, gigantic brother traveled over Europe and America and wrote about it, and not long before he died, he made a map here of his travels abroad and in America. This shows his concern with traveling and remembering his experiences to write them down. You were telling me, as we were talking before the program, that Tom wrote you from Europe about his seeing America more clearly from abroad. If you could tell us a little bit about
that. Now, Mr. McClellan, in going over your facsimile map that Tom made, when did he make this in Europe, didn't he?
Yes.
But it all seems to verify every place where the Tom has been, as I remember, back in those years of 1938, 35, right on through, when he made his trips to Europe. It was after 1935 that Tom made his trip back to Europe, where he was fleeing criticism upon the reception of his second major work of Time in the River. He had received some unfavorable criticism on Look Over the Angel, and he didn't want that to be repeated. And so Maxwell Perkins told him, he said, go off and take a trip. So Tom went to Europe, and he wouldn't even read with the telegrams. He wouldn't look at the Paris edition of the New York Times. While when Time of the River came out in April of 1935, until Max Perkins wired him and said, read the papers, you are a success. He said, well, the book is selling well, and of Time of the River is being praised by every critic in the country. Now, that was in 1935. Then, the year following, Tom came back and landed in New York upon the 4th day of July, 1935, and when he died in Seattle, not when he was sick in Seattle, and he wrote that famous letter to Maxwell Perkins, where he winds it up, we're telling him that he's reminded of that day 3 years ago, when I landed in New York, and you met me at the boat, and we went out upon the river, and then we went up on the tall building, and all the strangeness and the glory of the city was below. That was when he got back after the publication of Look Over the Angel, of Time in the River. Now, in 1936, Tom made his last trip to Europe. They owed him quite a bit of money in royalties. Rowalt and Company, for the publication of his books, but they couldn't pay him.
I believe that was when he was photographed in Germany with a streetcar and the church in the background.
That's right, in Berlin. That was the year that
the Great Olympic Games.
The Great Olympic Games, and Tom was the guest of Martha and John Dodd, who were the son and daughter of William Dodd, who was the American ambassador to Germany at that time.
Yes, and he recalled there that he was famous, and when he walked through the great Brandenburgen Gate in the fairy green of the Maytime, the air was shining with his name because he had become a famous man, what he set out to do years ago in Asheville. But that German trip was overshadowed. You were telling me earlier about Tom's experience at the Olympic Games with Adolf Hitler. I believe the audience would like to hear about that experience where Tom sat in the box and cheered for the Americans.
I'll be glad to tell you just as Tom told me.
Very good.
And later verified by Martha Dodd in her book Through Embassy Eyes.
Yes, sir.
Tom was a guest of Martha and John Dodd, was the daughter and the son of Mr. William Dodd, in the American Embassy box in the Sports Palace in Berlin, where the Olympic Games were held. They were sitting to the right of Hitler, and we had a famous American that I think most Americans know about, Jesse Owens, who took 4 gold medals. And Jesse would be mounted upon the top pedestal in the middle with the wreath of ivy upon his head, and the other nations would applaud loudly, but the Germans didn't favor that because Germany was not winning. They'd give just very faint applause. They said that Thomas Wolfe would hurl his 6'6" western North Carolina height to his feet, and then he would yell out and give his western North Carolina war whoop, "Come on, Jesse! Come on, Jesse!" Said that Hitler and Goering and the others would turn around and try to stare him down, but that he would let out one more whoop right in the teeth. That's when Tom became disillusioned on Germany. The Germany that he loved, he saw, had all deteriorated into the point where the Third Reich had the German people scared to death. They were afraid of being put into concentration camps, and the Jews were being persecuted. And that's when he wrote an article that was well received, and it was published in the New Republic called "I Have a Thing to Tell You." And it appeared in 3 issues of the New Republic back in 1936. And I think that is incorporated in either The Web of the Rock or You Can't Go Home Again. I forget which one.
It is, and liberal Germans who opposed Hitler since have said that your brother was the first man really to see Hitler's demonic nature. So there, as well as in so many areas, your brother revealed himself to be a great genius at interpreting human life, and also, as you have brought out, a great American who stood up for America and its principles in the face of Hitler that day. Well, Mr. Wolfe, we all know, but would like to hear a little more from you about Tom's childhood. You saw this genius growing up in western North Carolina, where all of you were natives, and your father kept the marble man's shop on the square. Was Tom, as a young boy, obviously the genius to be who we all have come to love in his writings?
His sisters and brothers did not recognize that fact. I didn't. And then I think Mabel sensed it. Well, she knew that Tom was going to be a success at what he was doing. Papa never lived to see Tom accomplish anything that he did. You see, Papa died in 1922, but my mother knew it. Well, she knew it instinctively that Tom had reached the point and that he was going to be a genius, and he was. No, we didn't know it, but my mother sensed it and she knew it. I don't think there's any question about that at all.
And he did read a lot when he was a little boy.
Oh, yes. I think Tom read possibly, in the course of his lifetime, I've heard him say that he must have read 15 or 20,000 volumes.
Well, I imagine we will have a lot of very young people, maybe some who themselves want to be writers, watching us. Would you feel that reading a lot's important to becoming a writer? Apparently it was for Tom.
I would certainly think you've got to absorb what somebody else who has become great has accomplished and done in order to absorb what you want to do yourself.
Right.
You know, Tom said, well, they asked him out to the Writers' Conference in 1935. They said, well, Mr. Wolfe or Tom, how did you become a writer? He says, I don't know how I became a writer, except that it was due to a certain force in me that had to write, and that suddenly burst through and found a channel. And he said, I began to write. He said, I also knew that I had to find the tongue to say what I wanted to say. I had to find the words. I had to find the words to say that my tongue could utter, that I did not know what to say. I think instinctively that Tom was simply put upon earth to accomplish what he did, and he had a purpose, and he pursued it. And there's only one thing that I think genius is. I think it is sweat, blood, and tears, and hard work. Essentially, and you're going to do it or die. You don't always die, sometimes you do. Tom, unfortunately, did die due to the trouble that he had at an untimely age of practically 38 years old. I was with Tom in the old Battery Park Hotel at Asheville in 1937. I think it was on August the 28th, just before he left the cabin up at 18 to return to New York. And we had, I think if I both brought the bottle. I don't mind telling this. It was a bottle of bourbon because the week before I'd used up Tom's. So I produced the bottle, and we had 2 or 3 drinks, and suddenly he reached over and he grabbed me by the knee. He said, "Fred, do you think I'm going to die?" I said, "Well, yes, Tom, you're going to die, and so am I." But I said, "What in the name of God's got into you, bud?" I said, "I'm practically 6 years older than you are, and you ought to be here a long time." He said, "I don't know, Fred." He said, "I have a premonition that I won't have time enough to live long enough to accomplish what I want to do." He said, "The doctors have told me that I've got to slow down at once, or that I'm going to crack up." Now, that was on the 28th day of July. Tom lived about a year longer, a little over.
And during that time, he wrote 2 novels, The Web and the Rock and You Can't Go Home Again, a collection of work posthumously published in The Hills Beyond, which featured short stories also. So that feeling of coming death drove him to work harder,
Well, I
apparently,
think
than
that, yes, well, he worked fast and furiously, but there's a little interlude there that should be explained. When Tom went back to New York in 1937, well, the greatest friend he ever had and who he loved was Maxwell Perkins of the Charles Scribner's Sons, Tom's first editor.
Yes.
Tom had been beset with 3 critical devils who kept him right upon pins to where he was worried to death. He was sensitive against that criticism of Bernard DeVoto.
Yes. Very bad
Struthers
critic.
Burt.
Yes.
And one other.
Yeah. Burt was a very petty, jealous, minor novelist.
And so, well, they said that Wolfe could not write without the support of Maxwell Perkins. When he presented his manuscript of Look Over Angels and the others, it was all Tom's work. Now what Maxwell Perkins did was to do the one thing that he could do, that he did for the others. Tom might have been a little bit harder, since he was of that sensitive nature, but Perkins had the ability to guide. He had that wonderful spirit of patience, and he's the one who carried Tom through. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, the lady from Florida,
Margie Kennan Rawlings,
Margie Kennan Rawlings, and 50 others. Maxwell Perkins, I was told by 2 of the leading editors in New York. One was Edward C. Aswell, who published Tom on his last 3 books. Posthumously after Tom died, they said, "The greatest editor in America?" They said that there was only one. He said, "The rest of us bowed to him." That's Maxwell Perkins. He said that he is absolutely unparalleled.
I believe Tom dedicated the Time in the River to him, did he not?
What Tom wrote me from New York, when he made the switch, Perkins told Tom up in his office on the 5th floor of the Scribner's building, "Tom," he said, "you haven't worked for a year and a half. This is worrying you to death. You've only got one thing to do." And he said, "You must do it." He said, "You must throw yourself open for a new publisher and leave the house of Scribner's right now." Maxwell Perkins told Tom that. So Canfield, he was the chief man at Harper's, and Mr. Saxon, who was the chief book editor, and this young man, exactly Tom's age, Edward Aswell, met Tom in his apartment at the old Chelsea Hotel, and with tears in his eyes, he signed the contract. They gave him an advance for $10,000. They said, "Wolfe, this is more money than you've ever seen. Now you need to be independent. And so we're giving you this advance to come with the house of Harper's, and we'll consider it an honor to publish you." Tom told me, he said, "Fred, I feel like one mourning for the dead." He said, "I'm leaving Scribner's, and you know why I'm leaving. But," he said, "I feel that I am going back." But Tom finished up his manuscript. He worked like hell, if you want to know it. Well, for the next year, he finished up the manuscript of over 1 million words that encompassed The Web and the Rock, You Can't Go Home Again, which is the greatest book on the evaluation of America that I think, has ever been written.
I think you're right, sir. Yes.
With the promise of America and his credo, all the way through it. So when Tom left on his ill-fated trip, first to Purdue University, then from Purdue West, and through the ensuing part that we've been through with,
yes,
and took ill that resulted in his death, he surrendered this shipping case of over 1.5 million words. That became those three books.
And we have some pictures, I believe, of Tom on that last trip.
Okay.
Thomas Wolfe in the summer of 1938 made a great trip of the Western National Parks with some newspaper men who were trying to show the average family could go to all these parks on a certain budget. And in these pictures, television audience will see what a vast man in size Thomas Wolfe was. He was over 6'5", I believe, and his physical size was matched by his mighty brain, which achieved this vast body of work with its glorious chants in praise of life in America Mr. Wolfe has been telling us about. Mr. Wolfe, there's been a legend that Tom was so large he couldn't sit comfortably at a desk and use the top of a refrigerator for a writing desk. Is this the truth, or is it one of the many legends about Tom? The pictures show what a huge man he was.
I think it is partly a build-up. He would write upon anything high, and he had a refrigerator, and that he did or did not, I never saw him write on it, but they say he did, and I really believe that he did.
Yes, the pictures show. We have one that you'll see of Tom Wolfe embracing a redwood tree. It seems to me this is an excellent picture, because like the American redwood tree, so Thomas Wolfe was a giant American, and when he died, it was like the crash of a great redwood tree. He fell ill out in Seattle. Mr. Wolfe was out there when he wrote a magnificent letter to Maxwell Perkins. Would you like to tell us a little about that? It indicated his continuing friendship for Perkins,
like to
didn't
put
it?
Two little items in one.
Good.
Well, the night that Tom was on with the trip and keeping his log, he wrote me a postcard and of this picture that came out later of that giant sequoia tree called the General Sherman. He said, "Fred, well, we're here today," and he said, "Wouldn't you like to have the toothpicks that this tree would make?" And of course, at the end of the trip, Tom took down with flu and pneumonia in Seattle, and I found out of his illness, and I went to him, and I stayed with him for 6 weeks. In the course of this time that he was there, latterly, toward the end of his illness, before my sister Mabel came out, he had a beautiful letter from Maxwell Perkins. I got all the mail. They presented to me first, just to examine to see if Tom physically was in shape to read his mail. I never kept a piece of mail away from him. I carried it immediately out to Providence Hospital, and Tom read it. His eyes lighted up, and he smiled, and he said, "Fred, I've got to answer this at once. Well, when you get me paper and pencil and guard the door, I'm not supposed to exert myself." I went out to the desk, and I got 4 or 5 pieces of the Providence Hospital stationery, all the small pieces, about like the small letter size. I gave it to Tom, and on the top of a Cosmopolitan or a magazine, he sat there with my pen, and he wrote that beautiful letter to Maxwell Perkins. And that was on the 12th day of August, 1938. He says, well, "Dear Max, I'm writing you this against orders. I have been to a strange country," and he said, "I've seen the dark man pretty close, meaning death, but I don't think I was too much afraid of him. But," he says, "in some strange way that I can't explain, I hope that I am a better and a wiser man, and I hope to God that I will be able to get out of here and to return." And he winds up and saying that, "I always think of that day 3 years ago, when you met me at the boat after a time of the river, and we went out upon the river on the high building and had the drink together, and the strangeness and the glory of New York Harbor lay below."
Yes.
That's in that letter. I was with Tom Wolfe when he wrote it.
This letter written at the end of his life contains his essence, this robust, mystical response to life as being wonderful. You know, it seems to me, Mr. Wolfe, Tom has much to say to us today. Many writers today, many young people are full of despair over the uproar in the world. If Tom were living today, do you feel he still would be as hopeful as when he died? I believe he would.
I think even more so. Back during those days, practically up to the time Tom died, he was beset with one feeling. It was a strange feeling, but a natural feeling in Tom's case. He was beset by the feeling of absolute loneliness. Now, what made Tom lonely were the thoughts of not living long enough to accomplish what he wanted to do and living alone with his thoughts. But when Tom was in the company of other people, I've seen him swing like the pendulum of a clock, where his spirits would rise in exuberation, and he would be joyful, and then I've seen the pendulum swing back when he would be a picture of utter desolation and despair, as if things were hopeless. But the whole thing amounted to that if you could get Tom away from himself, that he was completely the life of the party. I ought to know because I was with Tom many, many times, particularly while with newspaper men. Well, Tom, at every town that he would go in, would always get acquainted with the press. He had printer's blood in his ink. Well, he'd have to talk with the reporters, with the editors. They seemed to enjoy having him, and I've been with him a half a dozen times. He loved that.
Yes, I recall he did a little one-act play that appeared in The Hills Beyond, Gentlemen of the Press.
Yes.
I've always liked being myself a former newspaper man, and as a child in Bristol, where my father ran the paper, I remember when Tom came through Bristol, and the newspaper was the first place he went. He was at home with newsmen and writing all the time. As you know, Kennedy and Reeves, two great American literary scholars, have brought out 2 volumes of Tom's notebooks, one volume of which I have here. And as you know, wherever Tom went, he made notes,
yes,
apparently,
every place.
on the back of envelopes, on small pocket notebooks. And in his address on the way west on that fatal trip, he talked at Purdue. The television audience would be interested in knowing not only do we have his magnificent novels and stories to read, but his address to the literary awards banquet at Purdue is available in book form. Also,
that's by Bradford and Field.
Yes, sir. A very fine work in which he talked to the students about writing and living. He lived to write, apparently.
Yes,
didn't he?
no question about that. And that is the place where Tom made the explanation and the, how do you say it, when he gave the picture clearly of the reception of his book at Asheville.
Yes.
He said that, briefly, that the people back home in Asheville in Altamont, when Look Over an Angel was first published, received the book, and seeing that what a few things was absolutely true, which he said was true, that they literally branded everything in it as being absolutely true and literally intended, but he said that was not the purpose. He said that at that time, that it wasn't that Asheville didn't have brilliant people who could appreciate literature and books, whether his one book was one or not, but he said that there wasn't 50 people in Asheville who understood his purpose and his intentions of writing Look Over an Angel, that he did not portray the portrait of any one individual. Now that's controversial because Tom was autobiographical and they were pretty thinly disguised. But as he progressed of Time in the River and his other books, I think he showed progress of progression, and he got away from that. I think he was, Look Over an Angel is great. In fact, that was his baby, but I believe that Tom did correct a few mistakes that he felt that he made.
Yes, I believe I read in one of his letters to someone, he said Look Over an Angel was a young man's book where James Joyce had affected him a good deal, but that he felt his own voice began to come through more powerfully in Of Time and the River, and later on he created individual characters out of several people, I believe it or not. Nebraska Crane, the Indian
composite character.
baseball figure. This was what he was doing
you
more
take
to last.
Nebraska Crane, was the baseball player?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely a composite character.
He wasn't drawn from one,
two
in
different
other
people.
words. And, of course, he is a big character in two novels near the end, isn't he?
Where's that?
Nebraska Crane is in The Web and the Rock and You Can't Go Home Again.
I think so.
I believe.
Well, he's in both of them.
He's in both of those, and, of course, people love Tom for his colorful, life-affirming characters, and then for those great poetic prose chains. Tom loved October. Did Tom always, even as a little boy, love October? He wrote about it so grandly.
You see, October was a significant month for Tom. He was born in October. His favorite brother Ben and his twin, they were born in October. And my mother's firstborn child, who died in infancy, she was born in October. 4 of the family of 8 were October born. Yeah. It was Tom's natal month, and it had a great influence upon him. October was his month. There's no question about that. Look Home an Angel was published in October.
Then he was in the...
And he almost made the death line himself for October. He died upon September the 15th. Of course, he did not die in October. But there was so much had happened in October. And then every child that my mother had, her October-born children were the first to die. Leslie died in October, and Ben and Grover died in October. And then, as I said, Tom almost made the date line. So October was his month.
So no wonder he could write about it with such beauty as a month that was beautiful but also tragic. Then, as you have told an audience earlier today so movingly, he wrote a great prose poem about the promise of America.
Oh,
in
yes.
his last book. He believed in America, didn't he? Because it gave everyone an opportunity. How was it he said it? You stated so well there.
It was William Faulkner who received the Nobel Prize. What year, I don't know, but after Tom died, who made the statement when he was questioned about his having received it. They asked him a very pointed question, who he thought was the greatest American writer. They thought that he would say William Faulkner, but he said, oh, the greatest writer, unquestionably, is Thomas Wolfe. Well, they said, do you feel that way about it? He said, unquestionably. Well, they said, who is the next greatest? He said, well, William Faulkner, of course, and laughed. But he said that Tom Wolfe was the most magnificent failure of all American writers, but that he had done more to pinpoint on the head of a pen for the picture of America than any other living American writer in the 20th century, and I think Tom did. Now, just one question and quotation in closing, just to give you one little idea of Tom's vision of America. He says then, in closing the chapter of the